Hello everyone, my name is Norma Hernandez and today I will be talking about prison segregation in the United States. Alright, so before I give any historical background, I first want to define what prison segregation is. So it is a practice of isolating people in closed cells for as much as 24 hours a day with little to no human contact for periods of time ranging from days to decades. And prison segregation is also known as solitary confinement and restrictive housing. So throughout this presentation, I'll be interchangeably using those terms. All right, so in 1829, the first official experiment of solitary confinement was established in the U.S. at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. In 1934, it began to be more seriously practiced in the U.S. When the government built Alcatraz, which housed many of the nation's most notorious criminals like Al Capone and the Birdman. In the 1960s, a more modernized version of solitary confinement began to be inserted into the US prisons. And so the picture on the left is of the Eastern State Penitentiary, and the picture on the right is a picture of Alcatraz. Currently, solitary confinement is used to punish, to prevent, and sometimes for a prisoner's own protection. There are many ways a prisoner can be thrown in solitary confinement. One of the most common ways is through violent acts, such as killing or fighting. There are also non-extreme acts, like ignoring orders, that can also have you thrown in there. Now, it has become the main control strategy for these prisons. They believe it's the best way to create a safe environment, but multiple research has shown that this practice has had psychological and physical negative impacts on the prisoners, which is also known as the shoe syndrome, and some of the characteristics are hallucinations, hypersensitivity to external stimuli, high rates of anxiety and anger, and depression. The picture on the right is an example of what one of these cells looks like. So they're usually 6 by 9 feet. And you can see that the only light source coming through that cell is from that little window on the door. Now, all 50 states use some form of solitary confinement. Most prisons have a solitary confinement unit, and most local jails include cells where people are held in solitary. More than 122,000 incarcerated men, women, and children were held daily in some form of isolated confinement in prisons and in jails in 2019. This statistic is actually expected to be higher due to the shortcomings of gathering this type of data. Now, the figure on the right shows the use of solitary confinement in juvenile facilities across the US. 11 states have no limits on the use of solitary confinement, and those are the ones labeled in white. Cultural aspects. People of color are even more overrepresented in solitary than they are in the general prison population. They often receive longer terms in solitary than white people for the same disciplinary infractions. We can see that in the figures down below. In 2019, the Correctional Leaders of Association and Lyman Center at Yale Law School surveyed federal and most state prison systems and found that Black men make up 40.5% of the total male prison population and 43.4% of men in solitary confinement. Black women in prison are even more disproportionately sent to solitary. They make up 21.5% of women in prison, but 42.1% of women in solitary. People of color that often demonstrate mental illness are more likely to be punished with solitary confinement and less likely to receive diagnosis of mental illness compared to their white counterparts. These disparities are also shown in Latinos and in Native Americans in the prison system as well. Implications on education and SLP. So there's a loss of educational access. Prisoners are no longer able to attend the educational programs provided. They are also forbidden from having any resources for enrichment, such as reading and writing materials. Confinement causes difficulties in attention, memory, and problem solving, which are critical for learning. Anxiety, depression, and trauma from confinement can cause selective mutism, stuttering, or voice disorders. Now, this affects all age groups, but it is extremely damaging to children as they are still in stages of adolescent development. Before I talk about the virtual experience, I just want to give a little bit more additional information. So most incarcerated people will eventually return to their communities, yet little attention has been given to the impact of solitary confinement on reoffending and public safety. A 2015 report by the ACLU of Texas and the Texas Civil Rights Project found that people released from solitary confinement were more likely to return to prison compared to those released from the general prison population. Throughout the presentation, we've seen that this practice has done more damage than good. So I believe addressing the impacts of solitary confinement is essential for successful rehabilitation and community re-entry. Now, the link I provided gives you a short immersive experience to what it's like being in confinement. And throughout the video, people that were previously incarcerated and were in solitary confinement are narrating their experiences. So I thought this was really neat and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I hope you guys check it out. And this is the end of my presentation. So thank you very much.